He was the biggest star in the world, the king of rock and roll. Millions of people loved him. But behind the scenes, Elvis Presley was fighting a battle that nobody could win for him. Prescription drugs, isolation, and the pressure of maintaining his empire created a perfect storm. By the time he died in 1977, at just 42 years old, he was unrecognizable from the vibrant young performer who had changed music forever. In this video, we're going to explore the king of rock who spiraled into addiction. Elvis Aaron Presley was born in 1935 in Tupelo, Mississippi. His parents loved him deeply, and they encouraged his musical interests. He learned to play guitar. He listened to gospel, country, blues, and all kinds of music. He was a shy kid, but music gave him an outlet. By the time he was a teenager, Elvis had a genuine love for music that ran deep. In 1953, Elvis walked into Sun Studio in Memphis to record a song for his mother. The session didn't lead to anything immediately, but it caught the attention of Sam Phillips, the owner of Sun Records. Phillips was looking for someone who could bridge the gap between country and rhythm and blues. He thought Elvis might be the answer. In 1954, Elvis recorded "That's All Right," and something magical happened. The song played on the radio, and people responded to it. Elvis had something special, a voice that was distinctive, and a presence that was magnetic. That's all right, anyway. Between 1954 and 1955, Elvis became a regional phenomenon. He played local shows. He appeared on the Louisiana Hayride. He was beginning to build a following. In 1955, his contract was sold to RCA Records, and everything changed. His first recordings for RCA became massive national hits. He was suddenly on television. He was performing for thousands of people. He was the biggest new star in American music. By 1956, Elvis was a nationwide sensation. Teenagers were screaming at his shows. Parents were concerned about his influence. He was simultaneously celebrated and condemned. Some people thought his music was dangerous. Others thought he was the future of American music. What nobody disagreed on was that he was talented. His voice was distinctive. His charisma was undeniable. His impact on popular music was immediate and profound. The late 1950s and early 1960s were the peak years of Elvis's career. He was making movies in Hollywood. He was recording hit after hit. He was performing sellout shows across the country. He was wealthy beyond anything he had imagined as a poor kid from Mississippi. He could buy anything he wanted. He had fame, money, and adulation from millions of people. During this period, Elvis was more than just a musician. He was a cultural phenomenon. His hairstyle was copied by young men everywhere. His fashion choices influenced trends. His attitude and movements sparked controversy and conversation. Parents were concerned about his influence on their children. Religious leaders condemned his performances. But teenagers and young adults were devoted to him. He represented rebellion and freedom in a way that resonated deeply. In 1958, Elvis was drafted into the U.S. Army. This could have ended his career. Instead, it enhanced his reputation. He served his country honorably. He didn't try to get out of it. He went to Germany, served his time, and came back. When he returned to civilian life in 1960, he was even more popular. America appreciated his patriotism. His career picked back up where it had left off, and his status as a national icon was cemented. Elvis continued recording music through the 1960s. He made movies, though many of them were formulaic and repetitive. He was a box office draw, but the film industry was using him rather than showcasing his genuine talents. Despite the quality issues with his films, he remained commercially successful. His music in the 1960s was solid, but it wasn't as groundbreaking as his early work. Still, he remained one of the biggest stars in the world. His concerts sold out. His records sold well. His influence remained enormous.
Now don't be afraid, just relax and take it real.
By the late 1960s, Elvis was arguably the most famous person on the planet. He had won Grammy Awards. He had sold millions of records. He had performed in front of countless people. He had wealth that most people couldn't even imagine. By any measure, he had achieved the American dream. He had gone from poverty to being the king of rock and roll. But beneath the surface, things were beginning to fall apart. In 1967, Elvis married Priscilla Beaulieu. They had met when Elvis was stationed in Germany, and she was 14 years old. By the time they married, she was 23. They had a daughter together in 1968. For a moment, it seemed like Elvis had found happiness and stability. But his personal life was more complicated than it appeared publicly. Elvis was becoming increasingly isolated. He spent time at Graceland, his mansion in Memphis. He surrounded himself with what became known as the Memphis Mafia, a group of friends and associates who enabled his increasingly problematic behavior. These men were devoted to Elvis, but their devotion often manifested as enabling rather than helping. Within this group, Elvis had everything he wanted available to him at all times. Whatever he wanted, he could have. That kind of unlimited access and enablement created serious problems. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, Elvis's relationship with drugs was becoming more serious. It started with prescription medications. He had legitimate prescriptions for various medications. He received pills for back pain, for sleep issues, for anxiety. But over time, his use escalated dramatically. He was taking amphetamines to stay energized. He was taking sleeping pills to rest. He was taking painkillers for various ailments. What started as occasional use became daily use. What became daily use became dependency. Elvis wasn't using street drugs. He was using prescription medications prescribed by his personal physician. This created a false sense of legitimacy for his drug use. He wasn't a drug addict in the traditional sense. He was taking doctor-prescribed medications. But the reality was that he was abusing these medications. He was taking far more than prescribed. He was taking combinations of drugs that were dangerous and sometimes contradictory. He was becoming physiologically dependent on them. His tolerance was increasing. He needed more and more to achieve the same effects. Elvis's marriage to Priscilla was deteriorating. By the early 1970s, they were growing apart. Priscilla felt isolated in Elvis's world. She was dealing with her own personal struggles. Elvis was becoming increasingly unpredictable. His behavior was being affected by his medication use. In 1972, Elvis and Priscilla separated. By 1973, their divorce was finalized. It was a public humiliation for Elvis, who had always cultivated an image of stability and virtue. After the divorce, Elvis spiraled further. He lost a significant part of his personal stability. His relationship with his daughter, Lisa Marie, became strained. His weight fluctuated dramatically. He stopped taking care of his appearance in the way he once had. He was becoming a different person. His friends were concerned, but nobody knew how to help him. The enablers around him continued enabling. The doctors continued prescribing. Elvis continued using. During this period, Elvis was still recording. He still performed in concert. In fact, he returned to performing live shows in 1971 after a long absence from the concert stage. His comeback performances in Las Vegas were successful commercially. He sold out shows. Audiences still wanted to see him, but those who knew him were alarmed at his condition. He was overweight. He was lethargic. His performances, while still professionally executed, lacked the energy and intensity of his earlier work. By the mid-1970s, Elvis's physical condition was visibly declining. He was gaining significant weight. His face was becoming puffy from the medications and his sedentary lifestyle. His health was deteriorating in multiple ways. He had back problems from old injuries. He had knee problems from years of performing. He had various other ailments that plagued him. The medications he was taking to address these issues were making everything worse. The painkillers and sleeping pills that were supposed to help were actually destroying his body. Elvis's complexion was affected by his drug use. His skin looked unhealthy. His teeth were showing signs of neglect. His eyes had lost the sparkle they once had. He was physically transforming into someone unrecognizable. People who hadn't seen him in years would be shocked at his appearance. He looked exhausted and worn out, as if he had aged 30 years in 10. Elvis's mental state was also suffering dramatically. He was becoming paranoid. He was suspicious of people around him. He was having mood swings. Some days he would seem relatively normal. Other days he would be morose and withdrawn. He was experiencing what appeared to be depression and anxiety. He was making poor decisions based on irrational thinking. He was isolated at Graceland, surrounded by people who were primarily concerned with keeping him comfortable and happy, rather than helping him recover. His father Vernon was concerned, but he was aging himself and didn't have the ability to intervene effectively. His ex-wife Priscilla was trying to maintain her own life and couldn't force Elvis to get help. Elvis's physicians were deeply irresponsible. His primary physician, Dr. George Nicopolis, was prescribing massive quantities of medication without proper medical justification. Records later showed that Elvis was being prescribed thousands of pills per year, far more than any legitimate medical condition would warrant. The doctor was enabling Elvis's addiction rather than helping him overcome it. When Elvis wanted pills, the doctor provided them. There was no intervention. There was no attempt at treatment. Dr. Nicopolis seemed more interested in maintaining his position as Elvis's personal physician and the access and income that came with it than in actually helping his patient. By 1975 and 1976, Elvis's performance schedule was becoming increasingly erratic. He would cancel shows. He would show up late. His performances were sometimes brilliant, but increasingly, they were below his standards. His voice was affected by his drug use and his lifestyle. His stamina was diminished. He was a tired, worn-out man, pretending to still be the king of rock and roll. The illusion was starting to crack. By 1977, Elvis was in serious decline. He was only 41 years old, but he looked decades older. His health was failing. His mental state was fragile. He was still attempting to perform and record, but at significantly reduced capacity. He had brief moments where he seemed like he might pull out of the spiral, but those moments were increasingly rare. In early 1977, Elvis recorded what would be some of his last work. The album Moody Blue came out and sold well commercially, but it was clear that his creative energies were depleted. His voice was strained. His performances lacked the energy that had once defined him. He was struggling to get through recording sessions. His ability to focus and concentrate was compromised by his medication use. Elvis performed at the Las Vegas Hilton in early 1977 for what would be his final concert residency. The performances were inconsistent. Some nights he would deliver professional performances that hinted at his former glory. Other nights it was clear that he was struggling physically and mentally to get through the show. Audience members were sometimes disturbed by what they saw. Here was the king of rock and roll, looking bloated and exhausted, performing without the vitality that had made him famous. Elvis spent much of 1977 at Graceland. He was increasingly confined to his mansion. He spent time in his bedroom with his personal staff. He was living a life of extreme isolation and self-imprisonment. He had everything materially: wealth, comfort, luxury. But he was trapped. He was addicted to prescription medications. He couldn't escape the cycle. He didn't know how to ask for help. The people around him weren't equipped to intervene. His family was concerned but powerless. Elvis was also dealing with various legal issues related to his behavior. He had purchased guns legally, but there were incidents that raised concerns about his mental state. He was making concerning statements to people around him. He was talking about death and mortality in ways that alarmed people close to him. He seemed to be losing his will to live. He was physically deteriorating rapidly. The medication regimen was taking its toll on his entire system. His body was in rebellion against itself, breaking down from the chemical assault. Looking back now, it's clear that there were numerous warning signs that should have triggered intervention. People close to Elvis knew what was happening. His family members could see his decline. His bandmates and musicians knew. Doctors and healthcare workers who came into contact with him could see his deterioration. But nobody took decisive action. Nobody said, "This has to stop." Nobody forced him into treatment. One of the reasons nobody intervened was cultural. In the 1970s, addiction was still heavily stigmatized. Getting treatment was seen as weakness. particularly for someone in the public eye. Elvis was the king of rock and roll, an icon of strength and power. For him to admit he had a drug problem and needed help would have been seen as a fall from grace. The image was more important than the reality. Another reason was financial. Elvis was making enormous amounts of money. The Las Vegas shows were hugely profitable. Concert tours were sold out. Record companies were making money off him. Everyone around him who had a financial stake in his career wanted him to keep performing, regardless of his condition. The money was too good to risk on something like recovery. Additionally, nobody had the authority to force Elvis into treatment. He was an adult. He was wealthy. He was powerful. His doctor was complicit rather than being part of the solution. His family members loved him, but were powerless to intervene without his cooperation. His friends and associates were dependent on him for their employment and income. The system was set up for failure. It was designed, whether intentionally or not, to enable Elvis's self-destruction rather than to help him recover. There were moments when it seemed like things might change. There were times when people close to him expressed concern. There were discussions about getting him help, but nothing concrete ever came to pass. Elvis's life and death are littered with missed opportunities. Opportunities to get him proper treatment. Opportunities to surround him with people who would tell him the truth. Opportunities to change his environment and remove him from the enablers and the excess. But none of those opportunities were seized. On August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley died at his Graceland mansion. He was discovered by his bodyguard unresponsive on the bathroom floor. He was 42 years old. Initial reports suggested a heart attack, but the truth was more complicated. His heart had simply given out after years of abuse. The stress placed on his cardiovascular system by years of drug abuse had finally taken its toll. An autopsy was never performed. The family refused to allow it. But the cause of death was clearly related to his prolonged medication abuse. The circumstances of his death revealed the reality of his final days. He had been alone in his bathroom, apparently struggling with basic bodily functions. An ironic end for a man who had once commanded stages and audiences. The pills that were supposed to help him had destroyed him. The medications that were supposed to be beneficial had become toxic. His body couldn't sustain the chemical assault any longer. Elvis's death occurred at a time when he was at his lowest point. He had performances scheduled, but those who knew him best recognized that he was in no condition to perform. There was talk about canceling shows, but the money was too important. The obligations were too great. Elvis seemed trapped in a cycle that he couldn't break. Death, in some sense, may have been a release from a life that had become unbearable. News of Elvis's death shocked the world. Tributes poured in from around the globe. People who had grown up with his music were devastated. He had been a constant presence in popular culture for over 2 decades. His death marked the end of an era. The king of rock and roll was gone. Fans gathered at Graceland. Some people camped out on the lawn. The funeral was massive. Thousands of people came to pay their respects. In the years after his death, more information came out about the extent of his medication abuse. It became clear that he had been taking massive quantities of prescription drugs for years. His physician had been complicit in his destruction. The medical establishment had failed him. The people around him had failed him. By the time anyone seriously tried to intervene, it was far too late. The damage had been done. In the years following Elvis's death, investigations revealed the extent of his prescription drug abuse. His physician, Dr. George Nikopoulos, was charged with irresponsible prescribing. Records showed Elvis had been prescribed approximately 11,000 tablets of barbiturates and amphetamines in just over a year before his death, averaging about 30 pills per day. Most came from Dr. Nikopoulos. Though he was ultimately acquitted, his reputation was severely damaged, and he never practiced in the same capacity again. Elvis's autopsy results confirmed what people suspected. His body had been severely damaged by years of medication overuse. His heart was enlarged. His liver showed stress. Multiple drugs were present in his system at death. The medical evidence definitively proved that Elvis had essentially killed himself through medication abuse, though not intentionally. Elvis's death became a cautionary tale about the dangers of fame, wealth, and addiction. It sparked conversations about prescription drug abuse and physician responsibility. It demonstrated that addiction doesn't discriminate based on wealth or status. No amount of money or fame can protect you from addiction. Despite his tragic end, Elvis's legacy in music remained intact. His records continued to sell. Generations of musicians cited him as inspiration. His music never stopped being played on radio stations. He remained one of the most commercially successful musicians of all time, even after his death. Graceland became a pilgrimage site for fans worldwide. Hundreds of thousands visited yearly to pay respects. His image remained iconic. His influence on fashion, music, and popular culture remained undeniable. But those who remembered him from his peak years could never forget what he became by the end. Elvis's story became a case study in addiction and medical ethics. His death sparked changes in how the medical profession approaches patient care and prescription drug use. It raised awareness about prescription drug abuse and physician responsibility. Doctors became more cautious about prescribing medications in high quantities. The story raises important questions about responsibility. His doctor violated his patient's health. The people around Elvis couldn't intervene. Elvis himself had limited agency once addiction took hold. Society had failed to create support systems that could help. For people who remember Elvis from his peak years, his decline was shocking. It showed that the public image of a star often concealed private struggles. Elvis was an icon to millions, but also a human being struggling with addiction, isolation, and mental health issues nobody seemed equipped to help him overcome. Fame doesn't protect you from suffering. If anything, it isolates you and makes suffering worse. Elvis's death influenced how the entertainment industry began thinking about artist welfare. It demonstrated that addiction is a disease that can affect anyone, regardless of wealth, fame, or status. It showed the dangers of surrounding yourself with enablers rather than people who tell difficult truths. If Elvis's story resonated with you, we'd love for you to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We explore the real stories behind the music and musicians who shaped generations. We discuss addiction, mental health, and the pressures of fame. We examine what it meant to be a superstar and what that cost these artists. On this channel, we dig into music history honestly. We talk about the bright lights and the dark shadows. We look at how the music industry has changed. If you want to understand the full picture of music history and the human beings behind the fame, subscribe so you don't miss our next video. Hit the notification bell to stay updated whenever we post new content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.